Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Support for The Middle comes from you and from the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, preserving the story of the citizen soldier and connecting military history to the decisions citizens and leaders face today. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ, Tolliver. And Tolliver, there is a lot going on right now. Kristi Noem fired. There's, of course, the war happening in Iran. But there was a moment of bipartisanship in Washington this week.
Yeah, it was about daylight savings time, right?
No. Even though everybody seems to hate it, right, on both sides. It was actually about our topic this hour, which is the Epstein Files. A bipartisan group of members of Congress voted to subpoena the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, over the Justice Department's handling of the files. Now, as you know, Congress passed a law mandating that all of the government's unclassified records related to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein be released, and that nothing can be redacted to protect people from embarrassment except victim identities. But so far, a lot has been redacted that shouldn't have been, and some of the files have not been released yet. And as Republican Congressman Thomas Massey pointed out, the Justice Department has yet to charge anyone with anything as a result of what's in the files.
Over 24 people have resigned, CEOs, members of government worldwide. But I haven't seen any arrests or investigations here in the United States from this Department of Justice.
Now, President Trump, whose headshot is now on a poster on the side of the Department of Justice building, is mentioned in the files thousands of times, but says he's done nothing wrong and it's time for the country to move on. Obviously, lawmakers are not ready to move on, which is why they will question the Attorney General under oath. But we want to hear what you think. Do the Epstein Files matter to you as a voter? You can call in at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. And we'll get to your calls in just a moment. But first, we did a special earlier this week about the war with Iran. Got a lot of calls, and here are some of the voicemails that came in.
I'm Richard from Los Angeles, an Iranian that has lived in the U.S. for over 50 years, and I hear a lot of nonsense. This government, for 47 years, it hasn't improved. It has gotten worse and worse, continuing to get rid of this corrupt regime, and it has to be eliminated.
Hey there, my name is Randy. I think the actual code word for this is Operation Midterms, with the following goals. Number 1, take Epstein Files off the front page. Number 2, keep out of prison. 3, show strength to moderate the midterm massacre. 4, oh yeah, something about Iran, maybe distract people from the fact that Trump tore up the treaty.
Well, as always, you can hear that full show on our podcast. Just subscribe to The Middle wherever you listen to podcasts. And let's pick up on that idea of Operation Midterm, as Randy said, as we go to our topic this hour. Do the Epstein Files matter to you as a voter? Tolliver, how can people reach us?
You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com or comment on our live stream on YouTube. And spoiler alert, there's already 1 million emails in. Shocking.
Okay.
So
well, we're going to be hearing from
queue.
those as you tell them to us later. Gretchen Carlson joins us. She is the one whose sexual harassment lawsuit against former Fox News chairman Roger Ailes led to his ouster. She is co-founder now of Lift Our Voices. Gretchen, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And Jessica Yellin, longtime CNN journalist, now co-founder of News Not Noise, which you can find on Substack. You can find Jessica on Instagram at Jessica Yellin. Jessica, welcome to you.
Hi, thanks for having me, and it's great to see you, Gretchen.
Thanks, you as well.
Well, and let me start, before we get to the phones, Jessica, the fact that there was this bipartisan vote to subpoena Pam Bondi tells me that members of Congress in both parties know that after all this time, Americans still do want accountability on this. What do you think?
I think that they realize that they can't continue to kick this can down the road much longer. And I get the sense that members of Congress, too, and from my conversations, are themselves frustrated. It is not hard to deduce that something funny is going on here. And they have a responsibility to try to uncover it. Once you've opened the can of worms, they are holding these hearings, right? They're doing these depositions. How do you deny the need to call the Attorney General? And to be honest, I think that Hillary Clinton's testimony was so searing and precise that in some ways I think she kind of forced their hand. She made calling some of these people inevitable. It's no surprise to me that Howard Lutnick volunteered to go before them after Clinton herself made the case that he must.
But Trump has not said that he's going to testify before them, and we'll see if he gets called. Gretchen Carlson, why do you think there hasn't been more accountability in the United States so far when we've seen so much of it happening in other countries, leading right up to the former Prince Andrew?
Because of who's president of the United States right now. You know, he's named in these files third after, Epstein himself and Ghislaine Maxwell. Trump is the most notable person named. Again, not casting any sort of, accusations against him, but he's named in these a tremendous amount. So as long as he's president, one would have to assume that there's some reason why we're not getting to the bottom of this. Look, this is going to go down as the worst PR managed disaster in the history of presidential PR disasters. He probably could have made this go away a year ago, and instead he decided to call it a hoax. And that just promulgated more and more press coverage of this. And now you're at a point where, to Jessica's point, Hillary Clinton was brought in by Republicans, I believe, to embarrass her. And instead, he ended up saying she never even met Jeffrey Epstein and she has nothing to do with any of this. And now, you're still left with, well, what are really the answers to this whole thing? Because we still don't have the answers. I also think it's amazingly interesting that just today, late, they released those 3 missing FBI interviews from the young woman, at the time 13, who had accused Epstein of sexual assault. And they only had released
had accused Trump of sexual assault.
Exactly. But those 3 interviews done by the FBI were not released when the DOJ released the files. Now you subpoena Pam Bondi, and miraculously, suddenly those 3 files appear on the DOJ website.
Well, Jessica Yellin, what Gretchen is referring to there is someone who had accused Trump, according to the FBI, of abusing her back in 1983. She was interviewed several times starting in 2019. The DOJ had held back those files. Now they've been released. I wonder, though, Jessica Yellin, for voters, do you think that there is a difference in how women in this country view what's going on here and men?
It might be more visceral, and women might react to it slightly differently, but I think that this matters to everybody. And I think that there's a component where people just have enormous compassion and upset for the survivors and their lack of having any justice and being ignored and denied all these years. I also think on another level, Epstein speaks to something that so many of us are grappling with in this moment, which is this extreme divide between how people at the very top live and function and the rules that apply in their lives and what the rest of us have to live by. And I don't only mean a 2-tiered justice system. In part, that's it. But it's also the fact that women and girls without money were disposable to him, that Epstein was well known. He was reported on and convicted, and he kept operating. And the lesson that power took from his 2008 punishment, for example, was you don't have to stop. It's that this is survivable if you have enough money and you have enough power. And I think in a way, cracking open these files and learning about his relationships and how they function is a window into something much larger, which is what is not working in our democracy right now.
Interesting, because Gretchen, there's actually a poll that just came out from Reuters Ipsos that found 7 in 10 Americans believe that the Epstein Files show that powerful people in the U.S. are rarely held accountable for their actions. So this is about exactly what Jessica's talking about as well.
Yeah, a couple of big thoughts here. First of all, this type of behavior is not political, okay? I mean, I know all about this firsthand because when I came forward almost 10 years ago now against Roger Ailes at Fox News, people thought, oh, well, this is only because, this is Fox News. No, it turned out that it was a reckoning about power, right? Before somebody decides to sexually assault you or harass you, they don't ask you what political party you're in because they don't frickin' care, right? I mean, this is about exerting power over another person. That's why this story is so important too. That's why you're seeing Ro Khanna and Tom Massey come together. This is probably the only thing they agree on politically, but this is the way all of Americans should feel about this. Number two, because the Trump administration mishandled this, it was allowed to move out of just the Beltway in Washington, D.C. and people there caring about this story to the ether of water cooler discussion. That's why 7 in 10 Americans know about this story. It's even higher than that now. That's why so many people want to get to the bottom of this story now, because they've heard about this story, which goes back to what I said about what a PR disaster this has been from the administration. But let me just make sure to say, Jeremy, this is about the survivors. And had it not been from my story and countless others, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. This is because they never gave up. And because Americans believe them, that is massive progress.
Let me just finally ask, before we get to the phone calls, Jessica, just a political question here. Do you see this as something, as we head into the midterms, akin to the Mark Foley scandal back in 2006, which this is a member of Congress who was accused of sending inappropriate text messages to congressional pages. And that scandal ended up just sweeping Republicans out of power in 2006 and bringing Nancy Pelosi into the speaker's chair.
I can't predict what's going to happen in the midterms because there's so many other factors at play. But I do think that this feeds the enormous discontent with Trump and the Republican Party for the reasons that I mentioned before. It is the cover up. It is the perception that the president is not speaking honestly. If there's nothing to hide, why isn't he sitting in front of Congress? Why isn't he allowing the Justice Department to question him? It's the obvious. But the other point is what we're talking about, these web of relationships that well-connected people have, that his government represents, and that's at a time when so many Americans feel disenfranchised, silenced, unable to get their own fair shake. It's all crystallized in the way Epstein and his cohort are able to, quote, get away with it.
All right, stand by, because we are going to be back in a moment with calls from our listeners. You're listening to The Middle. This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking if the Epstein Files matter to you as a voter. Tolliver, the number again, please.
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com.
I'm joined by Gretchen Carlson, journalist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices, and Jessica Yellin, the journalist and founder of News Not Noise. And the phone lines have lit up, so let's go to Mark, who's in Aurora, Illinois. Mark, what do you think? Do the Epstein Files matter to you as a voter?
They do, but not because of a salacious interest. I think that they will test the mettle of Trump's integrity, and I think it will be found badly wanting. I think he would be happy to see Epstein become not only a guilty party, but also the scapegoat, because that would exonerate him, and I don't think he deserves to be exonerated. I think that his attitude has always been, I am entitled to whatever I want, and that includes forced sexual favors from women.
Do you expect that there will be more to come out, Mark, from the Epstein Files that we don't know yet?
Let's just say I wouldn't be at all surprised if there were. And it needs to be unredacted and unfiltered.
Yeah. Thank you for that call, Mark. Gretchen Carlson, somebody who wants to see it all, and it does matter to them.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is in the conscience of millions of Americans right now, and they feel like they're not being given all of the information, and that just breeds more discontent amongst people thinking that they're being lied to. I mean, for example, the Department of Justice probably thought they could get away with not releasing millions of documents because they said that they would not release anything if there was an active case. Well, we all know that they started a case in New York, presumably against President Clinton, but one might assume that they opened that case just so they could say that some of the files couldn't be released. And why was it that we were just talking about earlier that suddenly these 3 FBI interviews appear, within the last day or so, and they weren't there before? This just breeds discontent among the average American voter to wonder what else they're not being told.
Let's go to Holly, who's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Holly, what about you? Do the Epstein files matter?
Yes, they do.
Why?
I have 2 daughters, and they are in their 40s. And I asked the question, why has never anyone asked Trump if his daughter had been put in the situation of these young girls years ago? Because I think his daughter, Ivana, is about the same age as some of these girls now. What would he have done? Would he have just turned his back on it? Would he have made it just, well, that's what girls do? I just can't believe that question hasn't been raised. He has a daughter. How would he feel about his daughter if she were in that position?
Do you think that there will be accountability to your liking, Holly?
Absolutely not. He's not that kind of man. He ran you're fired show. That's his claim to fame. That's about it.
Holly, thank you. Jessica Yellin, what do you make of that?
I think that it's possible there will be no accountability for individuals who should be facing justice. I do think that over time we will learn what happened, or most of what happened, and have a lot of these survivors at least have their stories confirmed, if that's what the facts show. There is so much material out in the public right now. There is so much fascination and interest. That coincides with a moment in our history when people are deeply mistrustful of authority, deeply mistrustful of government, deeply mistrustful of the institutions that bring us justice. And so there's this energy among the public that it's sort of up to us to do the digging. And while that can go very much off the rails in the internet era, we're also seeing a lot of people unearth really quality information by going through these files and just sharing it online. It's almost like the public is doing the investigation. I think over time that will continue. A subsequent administration will be under pressure to release more. I think we're going to know a lot more than we know today.
I just want to bring up something that's part of this, which is that how Jeffrey Epstein died. The official statement, Gretchen, is that it was a suicide, but there are many who believe he was killed so he wouldn't talk. And a lot of people have gone down many conspiracy theories about what's going on. Why do you think that is important as we discuss the revelations from the files? Is like, how did he die? Is it really true that he committed suicide?
Well, look, that's opening up Pandora's box. Once you go down that rabbit hole of was he killed? Was he not? Was there a shadowy image in the video that came out when some of these DOJ documents came out now, as people allege that they saw? But I think it's incredibly important if it ever came out that there was some funny business going on, because obviously that would lead us down a whole different path of how he died. What I think is fascinating in this entire situation is that it was actually the MAGA base that wanted, more information about these Epstein files. Trump literally campaigned on this and allowed MAGA influencers to campaign on this for him. And then when Pam Bondi got in as the Attorney General, suddenly she just announced nothing here to see. And I think that they thought, because they had the ability to do this in the past with other issues, that the minute they said nothing to see here, they were able to clamp down on some of those issues, but not this one. And that's how we opened up this whole situation where it just got deeper and deeper into trouble for them. I really do think that now they're going to subpoena Bill Gates to come in. There are going to be more criminal charges in this. I've said this from the beginning. If they really get to the bottom of this, there will be a myriad of other criminal charges.
And of course, there are so many people. It's not just Bill Gates. Steve Bannon has talked about Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. Let's get to another call. Eric is calling from Golden, Colorado. Eric, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, so I definitely consider this when I'm thinking about voting and elections. I mean, according to Congressman Jamie Raskin, the unredacted files feature Trump's name more than 1 million times. So at this point, it doesn't even seem crazy to call it the Trump files. And if we're going to make informed decisions, we need to know if the president of the United States was involved in sex trafficking and what is, basically raping children or other offenses. And it also ties into what's going on with our media being consolidated under the billionaire class, which a lot of people are now referring to as the Epstein class. So getting information is harder and harder. We know that all sorts of figures may be involved in this, are named in it, as you were just discussing. And I said earlier, I'm originally from New Jersey. When Bob Menendez was caught with gold bars, I wanted him prosecuted. Not everyone did. Our country does not seem to hold power to account. It's a failing that other countries seem to be doing better at.
Yeah. Eric, thank you very much for that. Jessica Yellin, one thing that Eric just mentioned there was how the media covers this. I was looking at foxnews.com. I did a search on there for Epstein, and like 8 of the top 10 things were about Bill Clinton and Epstein, the stories that were on there. Is the media that Eric talks about now owned so incredibly by so many billionaires, are they covering this up?
I think that the media is walking really slowly on this. I mean, Fox, they're going to focus on all the Democrats, and then MSNBC is going to focus more on the Republicans, although they're going to be a little bit more fact-based, in my opinion. I do think that I've been surprised the extent to which some of the more centrist legacy institutions have been cautious about reporting. And my guess is that's because the names involved have extremely deep pockets and are extremely litigious. And they better have everything buttoned down before they start taking something out and putting it on air. And I think there are a lot of people who are doing investigations right now based on what they're reading there, and they will bring those out in time. But this isn't the sort of, we call it in the news, rip and read. Something comes in over the transom and you rush to air with it. They've got to be right, because these people will sue.
Right. Tolliver, you said there's a lot coming in. Go for it. Tell us what it is.
Billy in Savannah says, they matter to Trump. LOL. He's all in them. Bye-bye, Gnome. Thanks for handing us the midterms. Stephen in Dayton says, I don't care about the Epstein files as a voter. I care about the victims as human beings. And then Scott in Oberlin says, yes, the files need to be released for the simple fact that Trump's 2024 pre-election message was centered on releasing the files to prove Biden, Obama, and Clinton's connections to underage people's sex abuse. So just a few of them,
Yeah. Go ahead, Jessica.
One thing that I want to add after hearing Tolliver say that is one area where I think the media has been quite impressive is giving survivors airtime. I turn on the TV and I see somebody on air just about every day on cable news. They've been on about every network, and people are hearing them. And I think a lot of that's credit to Gretchen and the path she trailblazed by showing that you can speak out and live to tell and be heard. So while it's an interesting dichotomy, on the one hand, you hear from the survivors, but on the other, the media has been very slow to tell us who are the potentially guilty parties.
Let me just add, though, if I can, Jeremy, that I do believe that the print media has done an extraordinary job on this, much better than actually television. I guess I can say that because I come from the television realm. But there have been some amazing deep pieces, like the Miami Herald did one last week about how Epstein just influenced all of the lawyers around him that were in, the DAs and such. I mean, I think there have been a lot of great pieces by print media. The Wall Street Journal just did, and keep in mind, they're owned by Murdoch, who owns Fox News.
They're doing some of the best reporting out there right now.
They're doing some of the best reporting. And so, and if, as an observer, I would have to say that they are like, then you really should pay attention.
Yeah.
Because if they're doing a deep dive, then you know that they really checked all of their sources, dotted their I's and crossed their T's. But again, and thank you, Jessica, for the shout out. it does come down to the fact that we now live in a different culture than we did when these survivors first started coming forward 20 years ago. We live in a culture now, thanks to so many people, where people believe them. And that is really what has changed all of this. That's why people want to get to the bottom of this. If we were 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15, this would not be a story right now.
Before the Me Too movement.
That's right. It is
Yeah.
because now people believe survivors, and so they do want to get to the bottom of it.
All right, let's get to a couple more calls because all of the 10 lines that I can see are full right now. Brian is calling in from Tampa, Florida. Brian, go ahead with your thoughts. Are you concerned about the Epstein Files as a voter?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about it. Concerned about this criminality and lack of morality. It seems that this is something fundamental, should transcend party, should really transcend any viable religion. It was up to, I want to see accountability for these perpetrators.
You say it should transcend party. What party do you identify with, Brian?
Well, I've been a Republican, but I don't vote that way. Not since McCain was the last guy I liked. But they just lost. They have no ethics anymore, no basic morality. They're lost, and they're taking us with them. This is very heinous crimes by very powerful people, and it's up to me. I'd hang them.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Brian, thank you for that. Jessica Yellin, though, you can hear this is a disaffected Republican. You think there are a lot of people like that out there?
Yeah, I hear from them. I saw somebody the other day, I think it was on C-SPAN, calling in to apologize for voting for Trump, given what he's read in the Epstein files. I mean, this is, it cuts to the quick of just who you are as a person, right? How can you not have sympathy, empathy for what these then girls, now women, went through, and just disgust at the culture that surrounded him and the people that knew and looked the other way. I mean, we haven't talked about some of the people that are currently in the public eye who have not been accused of criminality, but socialized with him or friends with him after the conviction, after he went to jail. And I've interviewed people who had been into Epstein's house, and they'd all say there were signs all over the place that something was not right here. So for people who, especially doctors who were spending time with him, who are mandated reporters, things like that, I think it's just, it gives one the ick that this was allowed to go on and people look the other way, even if they didn't know the extent of his criminality.
Let me get to Ashley calling from New Orleans. Ashley, what about you? Do the Epstein Files matter to you as a voter?
Absolutely. They matter to me on every level in life, as a human, as a voter. And I believe they're important not only for the integrity of our leaders, but also for our national security. I have been reading many different sources. I've listened to 2-hour testimonies of survivors of not only Epstein, but Les Wexner, other people, extremely wealthy and powerful people. And also our media has focused really only on the details of the U.S. people who were involved. But this was an international network of people who are involved in all of this. And so if it's all of the most powerful people in the world, I mean, our government has this information, and our DOJ has been trying very hard to keep it under wraps and everything redacted, but other countries might also have a lot of this information. And if so, could use that as very extreme leverage to force, Trump to make certain decisions on bombing Iran, perhaps. I know that he's always been cozy with Israel, and that's just such a loaded topic. However, if people in charge of our country are making decisions.
I lost her there, but a very good point. And I'll point out that the two people in the United Kingdom who've been arrested over this, including former Prince Andrew, the Andrew formerly known as Prince, were both arrested because of state secrets. It involved state secrets over there. Tolliver, during the 2024 campaign, President Trump did a number of interviews in which he seemed to indicate a willingness to release the Epstein files.
Yeah, here he is on Lex Friedman's podcast just before the 2024 presidential election.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you're able to, you'll be...
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Now, Kennedy's interesting because it's so many years ago. They do that for danger, too, because, endangers certain people, et cetera, et cetera. So Kennedy is very different from the Epstein thing. But, yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
I guess we don't know what I'd be inclined to do the Epstein actually means, Tolliver. But
sounds like Miles Davis.
It sounds like like a kind of a dance. I'm not sure. We'll find out. Back with more of your calls on The Middle. This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This hour, we're asking if the Epstein files matter to you as a voter. I'm joined by Jessica Yellin, journalist and founder of News Not Noise, and Gretchen Carlson, journalist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices. Our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. By the way, if you don't get through, you can leave us a message, and we'll get to it on our weekly podcast extra, the follow-up, coming out in a few days. But let's get back to the phones and Abdul, who's calling in from Minneapolis. Abdul, what about you? Do the Epstein files matter to you as a voter?
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. Absolutely. There's three phases of the files that, really affect me in a way that makes me feel angry. You have the element of the kids and the people who are victims of these so-called, predators and, people who are in those houses and locations. You have the element of the blackmail or whatever the tapes may have been used for that troubles me. And we have the element of our own politicians and people in current offices that are working to stop that. So it's kind of like, it comes down to whether or not, if we had people in office that were affected by those tapes and files. Were there people in power that affected their decision making, and did that affect us as Americans? Were there people that were affected that then influenced others? And just kind of this feeling like where did all this information end? Was it just Jeffrey Epstein for his personal, financial, or whatever gains, or was there higher individuals that he reported back to? We just don't know.
Well, Abdul, let me ask you a question, because you're calling in from Minneapolis, where we've obviously seen ICE all over the news and the immigration crackdown. When you think about all the things that you're going to be considering as you vote, is Epstein in the top three?
Absolutely. Just a matter of the fact that it was held back for so long. Is it that compromising? Is it something that requires all of our politicians to, feign ignorance or, block any advances? Like, what are the reasons why it was taken so long for us as a public to find out? Obviously there's a protection of the victims, and that part we definitely understand. But is there anything beyond that?
Right.
Like, how important were the figures there?
Yeah. Abdul, thank you very much. Gretchen Carlson, your thoughts. Interesting. I mean, most of the time people vote on the economy, but obviously for Abdul, this is one of the things that's going to be at the top of his list.
It'd be interesting to see what a poll would say, because it usually is the economy and immigration. If you look back at the presidential election in 2024, ironically, two things that Trump was so strong on, which he's now completely underwater on because of the mismanagement of both of those. But one thing I will say is that I think what's really turned the tide here is that early on in the new Trump administration, Republicans would just do whatever he said, right? We've seen this sort of cratering of that, and the Epstein Files is a big reason why. If you look back to the original vote on releasing the Epstein Files, it was unanimous amongst Democrats and Republicans, except for one Republican holdout who holds out on various things, not because of actually the substance of it. And that was a huge turning point in my mind politically for Republicans to finally grow a spine and say, maybe we're not going to vote with Trump. And then I'll just mention that you still have this week the vote to be able to release members of Congress who've had to pay out using taxpayer dollars for sexual harassment. And you had the majority of Republicans saying, no, we don't need to vote for that. This is going to harm them in the midterm elections, similarly to their votes on Epstein or whatever their thoughts are. This is something that is now in the public conscience, just like the economy and immigration, because the public feels like they're not getting the entire truth. And that is a problem for the Republicans in the midterms.
Let's go to Oliver, who's calling in from Cincinnati, Ohio. Oliver, am I right here that you're 16 years old?
Yeah, I am 16. And I just wanted to comment about the Epstein Files. Obviously, I don't know very much being 16, but I just really want some clarity from the president about the Epstein Files. If I were to vote, what is happening, and to then make decisions from there.
Is this something that you're paying a lot of attention to as a 16-year-old?
Yes, because of school. Actually, there are a lot of people in school, a lot of kids that are constantly mentioning the Epstein Files. And sometimes this gets brought up by a teacher just randomly. And it's just really interesting to know what's happening in politics.
Yeah. Oliver, thank you for that. Jessica Yellin, kind of surprising, actually, that would come up in school right now, amid all the other things.
Yeah, I guess, it's a group of people who are extremely online, and this is really dominating online discourse.
Yeah.
We're in this era where conspiracy theories aren't conspiracies anymore, right? This is like weirder. You'd call this a conspiracy theory if it weren't actually happening in real life. And I think, one of the things we haven't brought up, and I'll just say it quickly, is a big unknown around Epstein is where did all the money come from? How did he get so wealthy? There is no record of him having a hedge fund, making trades. Nobody in business knows where the funds originally came from. And so I think that's a big piece of the unlock. When we start to learn that, we'll learn a little bit more about his relationships, what drove those relationships, and that might help explain why this has been under wraps and so many people are invested in keeping it secret.
Jessica, I want to ask you a question, just because you, with News Not Noise, you've thought a lot about our media, and I wonder, there are many Americans who think that the war in Iran was started in part to distract from what's happening with Epstein. I even felt a little weird, honestly, doing this show this week, which we had planned, and not doing another special about Iran. But we can't just push the Epstein story aside every single week either.
Yeah, I do get a lot of that. In fact, every time I post on Iran, anything that's going on there, people will write in comments, #Epstein Files, or don't look away. And Thomas Massie does it once a day. Representative Massie puts out a tweet that says, it's some sort of funny meme saying we're not looking away from the Epstein Files. Now, I would be hard pressed to think that this administration committed American blood and treasure to Iran merely to cover up for the Epstein Files. However, I think it's a convenient byproduct that we're talking about Iran instead of it so frequently now.
Let's get to Kayla, who's calling in from Denver. Hi, Kayla. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hey, how's it going? I just wanted to say that the Epstein Files probably won't change the way that I vote. I'll continue to vote the way I've always voted. But, it's a political issue. It's an abuse of power issue. But to me, it's a women's rights issue. And every woman I know has experienced behavior from a man in private that probably publicly would be difficult to explain and may not be believed. And I think right now we're all feeling this kind of collective anger and rage around what's been happening with the abuse of power and the Epstein Files and women's rights. And I heard you all touch a little bit on the Me Too movement, and it seems like right now this is the time to lift that veil and allow women to have a moment to be seen within a system that's always oppressed them.
Yeah. Kayla, thank you. Gretchen, do you think that this moment, how does this moment compare to the height of the Me Too movement?
It's a result of it. We wouldn't be having this moment where we would be believing the survivors had it not been for the Me Too movement and so many people before that. I mean, this is an evolution of progress for women. And what I think is so ironic and will go down in history probably as people study this time period is that so many women feel like their rights have been taken away under Trump. I mean, rightfully so, with the abortion rulings, et cetera, the rollback of DEI. And at the same time, you have this interesting dynamic in our society right now where you have these Epstein survivors being believed and actually the ones who are carrying this story forward. It's like every time they come to Washington, D.C. and do a press conference, we're back focusing on this. And so the interesting dichotomy is, okay, we have women's rights being diminished, but at the same time, we have women being lifted up because we're believing these survivors. So when I wake up every morning as somebody who's trying to be a leader in this movement and somebody who experienced nothing like these Epstein survivors, but something akin to sexual harassment in the workplace, I wake up with the optimistic glass half full that we continue to push forward, we continue to make change, we continue to be here for the survivors and for women. And I would just ask this of any member of Congress right now. If people ask you the question, raise your hand if you want to deny the rights to survivors who have had the courage to come forward and tell their stories, and you want to vote against them, do so at your own risk. Because as we're hearing from the callers tonight and the people around the world in polling, they want the answers. And so if you're going to stick along party lines, it's not going to work for you on this particular issue.
Let's go to William, who's calling in from Boise, Idaho. Hi, William. What about you? Do the Epstein files matter to you as a voter?
Yes, very much so. Just to dovetail off what the lady just said about Congress, I think it needs to go all the way down to the state legislatures. Here in Idaho, it's a very blue state, and it's very rarely mentioned by the governor or any of the state legislatures, and they just continue down the MAGA path.
You mean the very red state in Idaho?
Yes, very red state. I'm a blue guy in a red state.
This is why this show works, by the way, because there are so many blue people in red states and red people in blue states and purple people in all the states. So that, that it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, it does affect my vote, and we need the media just to keep going and don't let it drop off the plate.
Yeah.
That's my comment.
Okay, William, thank you very much. Jessica Yellin, one person we haven't talked about yet really is the only other person besides Jeffrey Epstein in this country really who's serving time for this, and that's Ghislaine Maxwell, who last August was moved into what they call Club Fed, kind of a minimum security prison, after she had a meeting with the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. What do you make of that?
I mean, you don't have to really put a lot together to figure out that she said the things that needed to be said to get improved conditions. All of that was not how America is supposed to work. You do not put the president's defense attorney in a deputy AG position in the Justice Department so that he can continue to act as a defense attorney for the man in charge. Blanche's press conferences are just, they'll go down in history as something like a shameful moment, I think, in American history, where he is there to protect his client and not represent the people. But I think that, listen, it's a double-edged sword. Ghislaine obviously was convicted for a reason and is in jail and should be in jail. And also it's wild that the only person actually serving a sentence and being punished for this is a woman. And so both things can be true at once. I will tell you that there is like wild online fascination with what her life is like there, and the number of stories about whether she got a puppy dog. Apparently, maybe they gave her a puppy dog. And if you've seen all the conspiracy theories that it's a body double in jail and the real Ghislaine is, people are obsessed with her.
But can I just jump in though, Jeremy, because look, President Trump could end this right now. The reason she's doing these antics and she comes before the committees and she takes the fifth and all that is because she's waiting for him to give her clemency or a pardon. Yeah. And every single time that he has been asked about this, wouldn't you think the answer from any sane individual, knowing what she has already been convicted of, that when they say, are you considering pardoning this horrible individual, wouldn't you think they would say, absolutely not? And he has never said that. And that is what keeps this whole conspiracy thing alive, because people wonder, why would he even think about giving her clemency or a pardon? And that has allowed her to be able to hoodwink not only Todd Blanche, but all the committee members when she comes forward and says she's not going to say anything unless she's given that freedom.
Right. Let me get to Alice, who's calling in from Grand Rapids, Michigan, a swing state. Alice, what about you? Is this going to affect you as a voter, the Epstein Files?
Yes, it does. And I can't even believe that we have to talk about this. I have heard people say, I don't care if a politician has committed a crime, as long as that person works for me, does what I want. And I can't believe that somebody would have such a lack of morality. Years ago, we would never have had this conversation, as far as I remember.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think that people, I don't know whether it would hold true, but they certainly would not admit that that they would allow criminality in our government.
Mm-hmm. Alice, thank you for that. Jessica Yellin, you think that's true? You've been covering politics for a very long time. You think that this is something that would not have been able to happen years ago?
Well, I honestly don't think a lot of people don't know the degree of the depravity that's documented in these files. Like, when the files come out and you start reading them, there is a measure. When she said, a lot of people are fine with a politician if they're a criminal as long as they're working for me. If they actually read what this alleges and was being covered up, I think that might change a lot of minds. Politicians have been committing crimes for as long as there have been politicians. They're humans and they're a little bit closer to power without access to money. So sure. But this is a whole other thing. And I think if people understood, that would change perceptions.
Tolliver, has anybody written in all the emails that are coming in who say it doesn't matter? They don't care.
No, we haven't had anybody talk about that. One interesting topic was some guys talking about how doctors colluded with Jeffrey Epstein in this process, and they want to hear more about that if anybody wants to talk about that on the show.
Jessica, you're nodding.
I mean, it's gruesome. Not only doctors are mandated reporters. They take an oath to care for people. They are the one person you're supposed to be able to go to and say, I'm in trouble, help me. Mm-hmm. And the idea that these doctors who wanted access to donors or to a lifestyle or to be just on the guest list would break that trust it's just chilling. And it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, which is this culture of no consequences. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's one of the reasons this is so resonant for people today.
And I would just add to that,
Gretchen.
that what this speaks to me more than anything else is about, unfortunately, how important sex is, especially, in these files, to men. Just the power of sex. And a lot of these documents are men just reaching out to Epstein to get sexual advice.
Yeah.
And the depravity of which they would lower themselves to ask for advice about how they would go out on a date or be able to get one of the women. And I think it showcases that some things never change in our culture.
Yeah. Well, we have to leave it there. I want to thank both of you, Gretchen Carlson, journalist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices, and Jessica Yellin, journalist and founder of News Not Noise. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us.
Thank you for
having us.
And next week, we've got a great topic, not on the news, that I've wanted to do for a long time. We're going to be asking you how you've come back from failure personally or professionally.
If you've got thoughts, and I'm sure you do, go to listentothemiddle.com and send us a note, and then sign up for our free weekly newsletter.
The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmastaz, John Barth, Brandon Condritz, and Marina Price. Our technical director is Steve Mork. Thanks to our satellite radio listeners, our podcast audience, and the nearly 500 public radio stations making it possible for people across the country to listen to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I will talk to you next week.